Hi everybody, it's Jason here. It's the 28th of May, a Thursday. It's the afternoon, about 5 o'clock, 5:30 that time. And this is day 70 of my Digging for Antigua project. I haven't done a video for quite a while now, and I thought it was time to do a little look in the garden and show you what's been going. Lots of things have been growing. A couple of overhead views to start with. This is the pumpkin patch. There's a lot more going on since the last video that I shot. So you can see the pumpkins and the squash and the sweet potatoes. I've also started adding more and more seedlings on the outside of the garden, just because less of the space is available inside now as those plants in the pumpkin patch are spreading. Moving round, you can see the passion fruit is starting to grow over the door frame on the entrance to the grow zone. It's looking really good. Again, you can see some more plants down there as I'm putting some of my seedlings in different places just to free up space. And a view of the melons. You can see along that strip, along that wall. And then here we have the Greek salad bed and cucumbers and various other things, just to give you a little overview. Close-up detail of the passion fruit. It's going really, really well. No flowers as yet, and I think that these can take 18 months to a year or two to flower for the first time. Now this was already a certain amount of time old when I got the seedlings. It was quite an established seedling, it wasn't a new seedling. So whether we'll get some flowers later in the year, I'm not sure, but so far there's not really very much, but lots of very, very healthy leaves. Having a look along this border here, these are all the cucumbers. You can see they're doing really good. Growing very, very nicely up this frame. Lots of flowers all the way from the very base of the plant all the way up the stems. So these potentially can all develop into cucumbers. I think that's another little cucumber there, starting to grow. At the very base of some of these plants, some of the cucumbers are getting quite large. I guess they're really harvest size now. I'm not really sure how big they grow if you just leave them. There's a good couple there, and there's some more under the other plants as well. Just a little close-up at the sweet potatoes. Not really sure whether they get flowers at any stage, but they haven't any flowers on any of them at the moment. The pumpkins, on the other hand, and the squash have been flowering. Or rather, the squash have been flowering. I'm not really sure whether the pumpkins have. You see how they've spread down into this area, either side of the bed, and now they're starting to climb up the wall. See some of the squash there. I'll have a quick closer look. There's a good few of those that are starting to develop, and lots of flowers still on this. This is butternut squash. Some details of the two pepper beds. These ones are red and yellow sweet peppers, 3 varieties. That's the running spinach. Some radishes there. The carrots never really came up. They're the spaces in between the radishes, never really came up. This is spicy peppers or hot peppers, 3 different varieties. Kale's going like crazy, and this is just looking at the cucumbers from the other side. Moving a little bit closer down here, you can see these big sweet pepper plants here are starting to flower quite nicely. See some flowers in there. Finally starting to get some little tomatoes on my sweet cherry tomato plants. Some more on these, lots of flowers still going. Down there you can see the lettuce. The lettuces are getting pretty good. These lettuces are really ready for harvest, but I've just left them in there for the time being. There you can see in the melon bed, 2 types of melon. You can see the cantaloupe starting to climb up the fence. And if you can see what I've done, I've just hung some pieces of string and then tried to get them to follow those pieces of string up. These cantaloupes are starting to flower nicely, and actually some of them are developing little melons. I don't know that this one is particularly. Let me see if I can find one that is. This is a little melon here. So after the flower goes, it's fertilised and then it starts to swell up like the cucumbers. But they're going to end up melons. All these plants quite related to each other, I think. And then these are the watermelons. Some of these have got flowers on as well. And they're spreading out quite nicely. Find some little flowers in there, you can see. This bed here, we've got a couple of okra plants, they're growing nicely. These ones are eggplant, cabbages, beans, peas and sugar snap peas. And the beetroots, after having them for so long as tiny little seedlings, really started to take off in the ground. And here are the 2 zucchini plants that I've managed to grow from seed. These are, as I said before, a yellow variety of zucchini. They're flowering nicely now. And in fact, is that a couple little zucchini down there starting to grow? These were the ones that took weeks and weeks to germinate. And I'd really given up on them, but I'd left them in the pot and eventually I got a couple of plants. And at the end of the garden, this is lettuces. There's the odd little bit of onion and beet in there, more lettuces, and then this is the corns. Now the corns continues to be a little bit of a conundrum to me. Some of the plants never did really grow very big, and they flowered the male parts and then they started to produce cobs on the bottom. So these cobs, I'll put my hand next to it, you know, these cobs are only about 6 inches long. There's 2 on that plant, and there's 1 on this plant, and then there's some of the other plants have got them as well. And then there's these other plants that I have to move right back so you can see them, and not at all stunted. They're now a good 5 foot tall, and they're starting to flower, but they're a lot more delayed in the flowering than the smaller ones. So you can see these are the male flowers at the top, the tassels, if I can focus that. There we go. So they're not producing seed just yet, those, or pollen should I say, those ones just yet. If I go around to this plant, this one, the tassels are starting to produce pollen. And then lower down on the plant, the idea goes that the cobs will start to develop, and then they will send out their silks, and then those silks are fertilized by the pollen from the male flower, the tassel, and then you get a corn. But ideally you don't want the flower, the male flower and the female flower from the same plant pollinating each other. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to end up with, so it's a bit of a conundrum. I can't get far enough away to give you good shots of this. And in between this, I've got a couple of butternut squash plants which are bearing fruits. More fruit under there, and more flowers. And this one is climbing up the fence. Just another final long shot of the whole plot. I stood right next to the corns. It's quite nice this time of night with the sun behind me. It's quite yellowy light. So you can really see how some of these plants have gone crazy. And I'm kind of fighting to keep these vining plants under control. I knew it would be an issue, but they are doing kind of what I want them to do. These cucumbers on the left are going up the fence the way I want. So is the passion fruit, the peas and the bean and the peppers, sorry, are going pretty much up where I want them to go. And I'm starting to do the same thing with these. I will do with these peas and beans when I get them. I'll have to put some kind of frame so that that great lot of peas and beans in those small area will all grow up in a great big tangle up that fence, as are the melons the cantaloupe starting to go up, watermelons, etc. Quick little shot of the herb patch. The basil going crazy, the others not really going badly, pretty well, but nothing fantastic. Not much of the garlic has actually sprouted. I've actually planted quite a few cloves in there, and there's only 3 of them have sprouted and started to grow. The other herbs are going well. These are the ones that are growing from seed. This is onions, they're going kind of good. And the coriander, as I said before, I've started to plant seeds directly into the ground, and that seems to be a much more successful strategy for me than growing them and then trying to prick them out and then plant them on. Especially things like coriander, which doesn't take too kindly to being transplanted, especially when it's very young. Same goes for the dill. These dill and coriander are much more advanced than ones I've got still in the garage that have been in little pots for a long time. They seem to like being planted out directly. Same goes for the onion. Just one more thing I wanted to say about pumpkins, the squash. Presumably it goes for the cucumbers as well, certainly the sweet potatoes. These plants need a lot of water when they get to this stage. These plants are watered heavily once every 24 hours. They could probably do with 2 lots of watering early morning before the sun really gets warm, and then late at night, like this time of day, 5-6 o'clock, just after the heat goes out of the sun, but before night. I think that would be best. They need quite a lot of water, and what tends to happen is if I don't water until 10-11 o'clock in the morning, if I have a bit of a lazy morning, which happens a bit more often than maybe it ought to, they all start to look really droopy and really sad. This time of the day they don't. I watered them this morning and they've still got enough water to exist throughout the day and still be pretty good, but they go real floppy and all the leaves go real floppy. And then you water them, within 5 or 10 minutes they're back to this state. So just to say, if you are growing these kind of plants and they are going all floppy, it's just because you're not watering them enough. And when you water them, they should recover pretty quickly. If you leave it too long, you'll go past the wilt point and they will be permanently wilted and they will essentially die. Potatoes are doing pretty well near the garbage and the compost heap. See, some of them are climbing up, and the others are quite flat. And you can also see the papaya doing very well. Fruit trees that we got have been planted out and they're doing very well, apart from the papaya, which didn't really survive being transplanted by the gardener where we got them. So they're quite, I think the roots must have been damaged when the plant was dug up and then it was put in some soil for me to transport it home, and it didn't really survive that process. It never recovered. These are the sugar apple, custard apple, soursop and raspberry. So that's it for today, and I hope you enjoyed my little update on the garden. You can see it there over my shoulder. It's growing really well. I'm very pleased with it so far. I haven't had a lot of insects or any kind of problems like that so far, but I am going around every day and just checking for bugs, and if I see anything, I'm afraid they get squished. But I'm not using any pesticides or insecticides, although I am using a little bit of fertilizer as and when needed. So hope you enjoyed that, and keep digging, keep gardening, and I'll see you later.